Just to let you guys know, hold autographs till after. Nick will be making his way out in the atrium, having a meet and greet for you guys a little bit later. Without further ado, if I can announce to you guys the amazing one-man band, Nicholas Scott.
Hey guys, thanks for that. But thank you all for coming. And today, as you probably guessed from the schedule, I'm going to be talking about NCPA. It's a newer thing that's come about. It's another agent. As Ethan said in his keynote, it is yet another agent. And I'll go over why it came about, because while programming agents is fun, or just programming in general is fun, you generally should have a point to what you're doing, especially if you're going to be, talking to like people such as yourselves about it who, actually want a use case and don't just want to hear an interesting problem, but actually maybe find a solution that they want or could use. Once again, my name is Nick. If you have questions, just come, tackle me after this talk or whatever. Ideas, problems, feature requests, whatever. This is an open source thing that I'm going to be going over today. This is not, something that you'd have to pay for. Like NNA is something that I talked about before that's got a price tag attached with it. This is completely open source. You can take it, use it, do whatever you want with it. Should stop getting ahead of my slides here. But so basically, first thing I want to talk about, because everybody knows what, I'm assuming everybody knows what an agent is, but just for people who are complete newbies, an agent is something that you would install on a remote system to, use it to do your bidding on that remote system and get information back. If you boil an agent down, that's exactly what it is. And the motivation was, it was actually last year at the conference. I don't know, there was a presenter that was supposed to talk here, but he got sick, and so he couldn't come this year. But we were talking in the bar, where all the best ideas happen. I'm sure you guys can understand. And he didn't understand why it was so complicated to get an agent for Nagios. Like he had to get Perl on some weird distribution box. He had to just get a whole bunch of stuff just to compile the plugins, and that wasn't even setting up the NRPE configuration. And he's like, why is it that I have to have NS client for this and then NRPE for this? Or if I want to send passive stuff, I've got to have something else. So you have to have this complete huge stable of different ways of doing things in your mind and in your intelligence. And then the people that you bring on have to learn all this, and it's just a huge overhead of information. And if that could be whittled down into just like one thing that sends passive checks, can receive active checks, can do all of it, can be installed on Windows, can be installed on Linux, can be installed on lots of different stuff, that would be ideal. But ideal, if you could wish in one hand and pee in the other and see which one fills up first. That's kind of what it was, but over the past year, I've just kind of been working on a cross-platform agent that seeks to fix that problem. And so the motivation was I wanted it to be cross-platform. That was number one, had to be cross-platform. B, it had to be extendable. I mean, I love running check CPU, check memory, and that's all you can run. But you always need more than that. It should be backwards compatible, and when I mean backwards compatible here, obviously this is the first version of NCPA, so it's going to be backwards compatible with itself because it's an empty set that it has to be backwards compatible with. But I wanted to include as many existing technologies into it so that I didn't have to rewrite the wheel and there didn't have to be a bunch of dependencies installed on servers. I also wanted it to be fairly straightforward and easy. I was trying to think about how to make it so that yes, you do have to learn something a little bit new, but it's straightforward and it's something that just kind of clicks and it makes sense. And then the other huge thing was as few dependencies as possible. I know like Perl, that's not really too much to ask on a Unix or Linux distribution. But I was trying to make it to Windows as well, and this is based in Python. And having Python installed on a Windows box is actually quite a bit to ask for like every box that it's going to be pushed out to, and that was unacceptable. I didn't want to have to ask people to install Python on every single Windows server or workstation that they wanted to install this on, because A, that could present some security vulnerabilities. I guess I don't really need to list off why that's not really a good thing. But these are really the big things that I was hoping to accomplish here. So just move on. So the specification is that it's based on Python. which you can get Python to compile on all, I guess maybe some really old HP Unix boxes or just some really ancient ones. I'm not sure, but you can get it to compile on many things. It's distributed, or it's distributable as a binary. You can run this with like not in its binary form, but it would have to have its like external dependencies, like the Python modules that it depends on to run, and all that kind of stuff. So you can still run it that way, but it's distributable as a binary. It sends back passive checks via NRDP. I was working on a pure Python NSCA because that's not pure Python. That's actually written in C, I think. So I was working on a pure Python way so that could be distributable via Python. And I'm going to go over all these. I'm just kind of giving you a gloss over. I don't know if any of you guys were in my previous demonstration, but I said that live demos make me sad, but I can't can this one into screenshots because it's just way too cool. And then it's got to have an accessible API. Which we'll definitely get to. And then this one actually kind of came up, this HUD. It's got a heads-up display like built into the actual agent, which might not really make sense right now, but as soon as you see it, you'll understand it. And that actually came about because my roommate, I was working on this, and I was like, programming a TCP server in Python, which is really easy, but it just grew by accretion. Like, oh, it'd be really cool if it could serve web pages too, and because it was originally just a JSON API that would give you the information. And I'm sure you guys know how that goes. Like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. Let's throw that in there. Let's throw that in there. Let's throw that in there. And then pretty soon you're rewriting the entire thing. And anyways, okay. So not really a whole lot of slides, just to give you guys an introduction of what I'm going to be talking about. But now it's demo time. So I don't know if we've got any fancy flashing lights that we could put on right now or anything. But so the idea of NCPA is that it's accessible as a web service. So it's basically, it starts up an HTTP server, and it uses HTTPS for encryption. It has to be HTTPS, so it won't respond if it's HTTP. But first things first, I'm just going to start it up. This is on my actual, yeah, thank you. Let's see, I think it's in, is that visible for you? All right, cool. Thank you. So I'm just going to start it up just in its debug mode. So this is just what it's running. So like now the agent is running. That's all you got to do, and it's just going to dump all of the debug to the output. We're not going to be staring at the terminal. I know you guys love staring at terminals, but I'm like maybe we could get together later tonight and stare at a terminal and So then this is running on my local box. So I am just going to connect to my local box. And it's the first thing I'll notice, you can specify an SSL certificate, but if you don't specify an SSL certificate, it'll just generate one when the server starts, and it'll just use that. So if you've got certificates that you can distribute or whatever that are trusted, that's supported here. We will proceed anyways. Okay, so this is what. Because you don't ever have to log into this thing. I want to make that clear. But for the, why is this cut off? Well, I guess we'll just do this. Okay. So you don't ever have to log into this. Like you don't have to log into this to see how your stuff is doing. That is not that's not the point of this thing. This is just to kind of demonstrate what the agent can do and show how easy it is to manipulate, how to change it. And keep in mind, so like this is running on Linux right now, but the exact same code, once it's distributed in binary, runs on Windows. I currently have it packaged for Windows. I've got it packaged as an RPM and a deb package. I've tested running it on Mac OS 10. And there's a couple. I do know that the backend library I'm using for the CPU stuff does work on Solaris, but I haven't built it on Solaris. But it's just Python, and I've actually seen build instructions for what I'm using to distribute this in binary for Solaris. So I would need a Solaris box to help like build it on. But after I have it built, we can distribute it. So basically, it's like the login, and the login. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with NRDP, but NRDP has like the notion of tokens that you use to verify yourself. It's so I'm just going to type in and that's kind of what you think of as the password to get in here. I believe the default is okay. So you log in. It just basically gives you information about the agent that this is installed on. So that what? Oh, yeah. Thanks. Sorry. Okay, so it gives you information about the actual agent that's installed. This is the NCPA version, so it's just the 1.0. It tells you how long the agent's actually been up and running, and then it tells you some of this other stuff here. I don't know how much this is getting messed up, but like all this processor type stuff that really, I guess it doesn't matter like too much. Like this is something that you probably not going to care about anyways. Like check to monitor that the server is still Linux. I'm sure that's not really a big check that people run. But the information is there, and just like as a side note, this was done with like I'm not a like a huge web front end developer, but this is like it's got a mobile interface for it just because of the CSS that was used to do it. But getting more onto the actual so one other thing, like this is the HUD that I'm talking about, and it kind of got really compressed. But so like now, like when you log into it and you ask it for the HUD or the display, it actually shows like these graphs as it goes and as it changes. I'm looking into ways to get it so that it's got like a back end of information so that this like becomes fully completed and so you can actually see it. But this is not meant for like long-term trending analysis. This is like that to me is kind of what Nagios is supposed to do. If you want trending, that's with Nagios. But if you only have checks every 5 minutes on the server and something's going on, the CPU spiking, you can log into the actual interface for whatever server is going. And obviously memory usage is not the most interesting of all graphs. Something like CPU usage might be a little more interesting, and it updates as it goes. Just to kind of give you an idea of what's happening. So, and it obviously it updates every 2 seconds, I think. So if something's happening, you can log in, check it out, and then maybe do some fixes, and then remotely you can see exactly when the CPU stops spiking, something like that. So this is all done with, it's just making calls to itself because I really drank the Kool-Aid with APIs, and I really love them. So like this is just making like JavaScript requests back and forth just so it can update itself. And these are just graphs that are there. Obviously, user count, I don't know. It was basically proof of concept. Like, oh, sweet, I can graph a whole bunch of stuff, and then like users. How often is that really changing? You've got a lot of users logging in and out. It's not all that interesting. Same with and so it does like memory usage, swap usage, all of this stuff as far as the front end goes. And then it does disks and interfaces, which again aren't really all that interesting. And I've yet to find a good way to really to do a generalization of a graph for an interface, because I just assumed on megabits per second. But obviously this is doing not that much, so it's always going to be around 0. So that's a work in progress. But the idea is that there's graphs that you can log in to see every 2 seconds where it is and what it's doing. So once again, it's not meant for long-term trending, but these graphs are there. Moving along, as far as these go, it's got a built-in configuration manager, and I've been kicking around the idea of having this being able to be disabled, because this might seem like a security exploitable thing. But this is completely configurable from the actual web interface. So if you need to make a quick change on just a single config or something, you can log in here, select everything, I guess, or just look at what it is, see what the token is, see what the actual settings are, and change it. And then once you change it, you save your changes, and then it actually applies that config to the actual listener and all that stuff. And I guess I take this time to point out, this does do active and passive checks. Obviously, it's not very fun to watch a passive daemon or like a passive checks come in, but this does send back passive results, which are specified in here. And it kind of got all foobarred up with the size, but let's see, is this a good time to start talking about the passive checks and how you specify them? Because it is kind of cool. Okay, Actually, I will, but I'm going to not do that at this point because I'm going to go through the config, and it'll be a lot more logical once it's not in a weird form like that. Okay, so I covered that it's that you can specify, you can change the config via the actual web interface. At this point, I should probably point out this is NERDS compliant as well. If you are using NERDS, or if you don't know what it is, I'll just give it a like 1 or 2 sentence description. It's a way to remotely make sure that your configs are all set up. It's kind of like maybe like a Puppet Lite, you might be able to think of it. It'll pull down stuff that's updated. It'll pull down new configs. It'll pull down new plugins and just put them where they need to go so that whatever agent you're using can use them. It's been predominantly used by the NERDS agent, which might seem a little confusing, but there is a bit of a nomenclature confusion there. I guess I see NERDS more of as the protocol to update configs and update plugins, and then there's a NERDS agent as well. But I digress. So configurable through the web interface. Let's keep going here. Now let's go to the cool part. Okay, this is the part where most of where like I think the actual idea is. So basically, like this agent is just sitting there running on some server of yours, and you can there's no token in here because I logged in through the actual web interface, so I don't have to add token on the end of everything. But if you're not logged in and it doesn't have a session for you, it'll ask you for your token. It'll say so. I mean, this isn't just out there blowing in the breeze with all the information that you need. So basically, it is a tree, and if you give it the root, it just enumerates the entire root. Now that might sound familiar, might sound like SNMP, and it is because SNMP has some really great ideas if they weren't so obfuscated behind their other great ideas. So let's just take a look at it here, and I'm just going to grab the something. Let's see here. I'll just point out right now the percent is lazy, just because it takes some time to actually get the percent. So it doesn't actually go through and evaluate that. It's the same with a couple of the other ones. Like, it will not enumerate everything. The actual lazy node, it will not go through and try and evaluate the lazy node, because I don't know how familiar you guys are with a tree structure, but it just goes down, and if it finds a node, it just enumerates all of its children, and if any of its children are enumeratable, it'll enumerate those, and then if it's lazy, will stop trying to enumerate because it could take way too long, like listing every process that exists on the system. But okay, so let us check out something maybe a little cool. So if we just type in CPU in the top here, I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but I just added CPU to the address. Is there any way I could get that to be bigger? I don't think so. Okay, but I basically typed in the address here for the actual box that it's on, and then it's API, and then I just typed in something like CPU here, and I put that on after CPU. I'm sorry, after API. So I'm going to hit enter, and now it's basically just enumerated the CPU tree, because there's a couple like trunk nodes: CPU, memory, disk, interfaces, agent. And in agent, that's where you'd install like plugins, because the idea for this was to give you the backbone of checks that everybody runs, like check CPU usage, what's my memory at, what's the disk at, what's all of this stuff. Give me all that information. And then for like really specific stuff, I'm looking to find a way to make this extensible, so you could like make your own like nodes like this, but for the time being, it'll run Nagios plugins like everything will. So if we want to get an actual value here, let's just grab, I don't know, like idle. Let's just grab, or count. Let's do count. That's fine. I'm not sure how many people, like, if you've got any CPU bandits, but so if we do this, now we pared it down, because in the tree there's a CPU node, and then under that node there was a count, and now I've specified it, and now that knows that it's a leaf node, so that's all it has to do. So like now we just have this value of count too. So, well, Nick, that's really awesome. I've got some JSON that tells me what that is. Now I've got to write a shell script to do this. That sounds completely useless. Okay, you can if you want, but you don't have to. If we just start adding some variables here, I'm going to add the argument check is equal to true. Gosh, is there? I'm gonna add an argument on the end of this URL that says check is equal to true. So so basically, when it gets this address, it checks to see if there's a couple variables here, and check is one of them. So it's saying, I want this to be a check. I don't want the value. I want you to run this as if it were a Nagios check. And it checks it. We didn't give it a warning. We didn't give it a critical. But it gives us our Nagios return code, which is 0, and the standard out, which is OK. I mean, that sounds about right. And it says count was 2.0 because there was 2 processors there. And then it gives you the perf data as well. This is also capable. If we want the warning to be equal to 1, we just add something on the end here that says warning equals 1. As a get variable, and boom. Now it knows that the warning value is 1, and that standard out is warning count was 2. I mean, and as you can probably guess what I'm gonna do next, and I'm gonna add critical as a get argument on here and set that equal to 2. So now, let's see. Well, I may have found a bug. Because I think that if I said critical was supposed to be equal to 2, that should be, I might be using a greater than or equal to, or it's probably like one of those exact equality things. But OK, but the point is that this is all specifiable on the actual get our arguments here, so you can get this stuff. So you can either use the existing plugin to check this, or if you have some other system that you're trying to work into your Nagios installation, or you have your own way that you want to write scripts to get this stuff to you, or you just have something else. You're not bound to something specific, to like NRPE, or well, you're just not really bound to anything in specific. I was trying to get all of this into like a really agnostic format, and that's what it is. And this is all accessible through the web API. And I would just like to reiterate that this functions the same on Windows, on Linux, on Mac OS. I mean, I haven't tested it on Solaris, but I'm almost 100% sure that it'll work. So you would just get this installed on your things, and they would all look the same. Because why do you care if it's a Solaris box? I'm sure you would care if it's a Solaris box, because if someone's got to fix it and you send someone who has never used Solaris to go fix it, then obviously there's going to be a problem. Well, maybe they've, anyways. But the point is, as far as like a business process or something like that, it doesn't matter what the platform is. But the thing is that you as a monitoring person have to like care what the actual platform is, because you have to install the right software on it, which I think is a little bit of a little bit unnecessary, because it shouldn't matter. You should just be able to monitor what you want to monitor without worrying about what the actual platform is. Okay, I just repeated myself twice there, but that's how much I believe it. Here we did some stuff with the actual like setting the warnings and criticals. This also does deltas as well, like as far as interfaces go. We'll just kind of head back here. I'm going to change the API. We're going to check out interface. Is it interfaces or interface? It must be interface. Yep, OK. So now it has enumerated all of the interfaces on this device. So I didn't, I swear to God, did not tell it what interfaces it has. Just as if I put in disk, I have not told it what disks it has. It just knows because it has queried the actual operating system for this information. So here I've typed in API disk, and it actually enumerates all of the logical volumes, and then it'll enumerate all of the actual volumes as well. And so there's another thing. So when you're installing something, like you've got like a Windows box and you install something on there, like you can usually logically assume that C drive is going to be on there. But maybe there's other disks and you don't exactly know what the drive letter is, or you don't know that information. You have to actively find that information. This, from the web interface, will enumerate all that stuff, and you can figure out what you actually want to monitor on this. So back to the interface, because there's one last thing on the API I do want to demonstrate. Let's see, do I have anything that is actually producing data? I do. So I'll just type in my LO, and this gives me the information that it has on my LO. And as you can see, they're in bytes, which are generally useless. You have to generate deltas, like what is it now? What is it now? What is it now? What is it now? And just get the deltas that way, because it's just giving you, this is how many bytes I've seen, good luck. And so I'm going to type in bytes received, but I'm going to type it in correctly. And so now it's saying, okay, this is how many bytes that I've seen, and I'm just going to refresh this page a couple times. See, yep, and you can see that, or I hope you can see that number. You can see that this number, as I hit F5, is going up, as you would expect, because it's seeing, it's actually receiving bytes. But I'm sure we can all relate with each other. This is fun, but you shouldn't be expected to remember what the last value was. So let's see here. If I say check is equal to true and delta is equal to true. Okay, so it says bytes received was 0 bytes per second because this is the first time that it's ran. So it just says 0. Okay, whatever. I don't have anything to check against. So okay, but after we run it again with delta is equal to true, we actually get bytes received was this many bytes per second, and it shows you that information, puts it on there, all like normal. So this can do deltas on interfaces as well. You don't have to install any additional plugins to do any of this stuff that I've been talking about. This just comes with the agent. It's going to be the same for everywhere you install the agent, so you don't need a billion different plugins to do this. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure you guys get the point. So let's see what to talk about now. Oh yeah, how it handles plugins. It can actually run plugins like this. I'm not sure what plugins I have bundled in here, because if I go to API and I go to agent, it will tell me what plugins I have. I have Yancey for Pres.shell, and I've got test.vbs. My roommate is named Yancey. It's a small coincidence. And I believe if I run plugin, and then I run Yancey for Pres.shell, this should run. Yes. And you guys don't know the contents of Yancey for Pres.shell, but it basically just exit with an error code of 2. But so basically this is how you would run plugins remotely, is you would just like agent plugin, and then in its plugins directory it looks for yancey.pres.shell, and then actually if I recall correctly, I can do, yes. So each additional slash, the actual, like in the URL, it will interpret as this is argument 1, and then slash argument 2, slash argument 3, and it will run it like that. Like here I typed in Yancey for Pres /hi. And so Yancey for Pres returns the error code 2, and then whatever arguments, and then prints whatever arguments were given to it. So this is how you run plugins. So, because I'm sure you guys have a billion plugins that do exactly what you guys need to do for the special stuff that you guys do. And this does not preclude those plugins being used, which is handy and was one of the cornerstones that had to happen for backwards compatibility reasons. Okay. So I've talked about the API, and I hope I've explained it in a decent, coherent manner. That this is accessible. This is not limited to just the agent. You can do whatever you want with it. It's in JSON. It's not dumping Python pickle format or whatever weird serialization that could be happening. So I'll move on from there because I think I've been talking about it for too long, but I really like the idea. And I'll go back to the actual web interface. Something else to point out is the actual help does come bundled with the actual agent in a similar format. So if you have any questions and you are maybe on your own island as far as the network goes, or you don't want to bother digging through like lookup NCPA help documentation, it's in the agent. It is literally served by the same thing that serves all of the information. Okay, so said enough about that. So there's the log, and okay, so let's quickly talk about the passive agent, of which we will talk about the actual config at the same time, because that's generally all passive stuff is configuration stuff, and then crossing your fingers and hope that the other side gets it. But just in the config, you basically set up normal config stuff, log files, PID files. Obviously, the PID file is ignored for Windows, as is the user ID. The passive, this is to control the passive daemon. And then, actually something I neglected to mention is the actual so this NRDP section in here is what controls how it actually sends back passive results. And coincidentally, there is a URL that you can hit on the NCPA agent that's that your NCPA agent / NRDP, and it will essentially forward the traffic that comes in there to its parent NRDP server. So you could, if you only wanted to poke one hole from one certain IP in a firewall, you could have this set up to be a proxy for NRDP traffic and send it through. I mean, I know you guys are working on some pretty intense limitations, but that's something that is built in there, is the ability to forward the NRDP traffic, where you specify the token that it needs to send it as, and the actual host name that it will show up as, which I will talk about in a second, and the actual NRDP server that it will send it to. I'm going to skip the nerds section because that is beyond the scope of this demonstration. If you guys are interested in nerds, I think Yancey's given one. I don't know. There's probably someone talking about nerds, or we can talk about it afterwards. I mean, I just love talking, obviously. So, and now if we scoot down a little further, there's a section for you specify your token. And obviously this is not served. I mean, this isn't served through Apache or anything. I don't know if you guys have ever done any web development in Python, but I sincerely suggest that you check it out because it is awesome. It is so much more straightforward than other systems. So then this bottom section is what I wanted to talk about. This, I'm sure you guys have seen something like this before, where you can specify certain things that happen for certain file name suffixes. So if it's told to execute a plugin that ends in .ps1, it will actually execute this on the command line, and it will fill in plugin name for the actual plugin name that it got called with, and then actual plugin args. So I mean, specifically for PowerShell, I don't know how many Windows, how many people are monitoring stuff with Windows, but PowerShell stuff just seems to be kind of a pain in the rear, and it's same with VBS. There's some certain stuff that needs to be called. You can't simply execute it, or anything like that. So there is the special things that you can set aside for it. And then as far as what I wanted to actually talk about was the passive checks. So if you'll notice here, is this legible for everybody? Oh, okay. Sorry, I get ahead of myself, so I really appreciate it. When you point out that you can't read it. No offense taken, obviously. So if we see here, we've got host name surrounded in %signs, and then something equal to some command. Now this command is the actual API address that it's going to hit in what I was just showing you, memory swap %, and then it's going to pass it a warning or a critical. You can copy and paste the exact same URL you used to find what you actually wanted to monitor, and just paste it there. But how that's going to show up is this host name that was specified up in NRDP is actually going to get substituted in here. And if there's no host name specified up here, it tries to figure it out for you. It looks at the actual node name of your computer, then it tries to resolve its IP against Google as a very last resort, I think. And if it can't do any of that, then it just dumps in host name, I believe. But so it substitutes that in there, and then the actual service name. So this, as a passive check, is going to get sent back as host name, service name. It's separated by a pipe. Now, that might sound okay. Well, obviously, no kidding. But the thing about this is you could conceivably, this is not bound to only send back results for itself. I don't think that the plugin is actually bound in along with it. But you could conceivably do, so I also want to send back results for server 2, and I want it to be swap usage, and it's going to be equal to, I believe it would be agent plugin, and this is the plugin that doesn't actually exist, but it's basically like a check local. It's something that I was just thinking about like a check local that would basically just do a wget request on the actual argument. So the actual wget would be the address of the other things on your network that this is going to be sending back and being the actual kind of scheduler for. So every time that this passive daemon kicks off, it would send back results for itself, and then also for server 2, because that is named explicitly, and that will not get substituted with the actual host name that it is. And so you could just have this do all of it instead of having to install, instead of having to have configurations for passive checks on all of them. You just have it in one spot if it's really a pain or a bear to have all of them sending back results. So I just think that might be somewhat useful. And then let's see here. Hit that. Okay, so that is kind of largely what I wanted to actually demonstrate today was the passive, the active, the API, which I think is awesome. So then I'm going to kind of move it back, back to an actual presentation rather than a live demo. And it's really, it's not really much of a presentation. But so if you're interested, once again, this is open source. I am not a packager. I've sunk so much time into packaging that I'm starting to think that I'm a packager, but I'm not. So if any of you are interested or have systems that are maybe hard to come by, that I'd have to spin up some weird Spark server to get this built on so that it can be used, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm interested in working with people to get it so that there's something that meets their needs. So that obviously means ideas. This has basically been in a jar for a while, and it needs to breathe. So ideas, always welcome. And then obviously, if you're interested in development, you can take it, do whatever you want with it. It's open source. And then I did talk for a moment about building it already. So if you have a setup that I could, some rare setup that I could use for building or something like that, just to get it so that you can use it in your environment, that would be awesome. And then we can let the community have it too. I think that is most of what I wanted to talk about. Let's see, is there any more slides? Oh, no, there are no more slides. So does anybody have any questions? Any clarifications? Go for it. I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun again.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
No, I can't. Quick, before he gives you the mic.
I just had a quick question about, when you were doing the demo and you went to the API where you could call the custom plugin.
Yep.
When you're actually calling with the parameters, which are separated by forward slashes, if you actually need to pass a series of forward slashes, how do you escape that?
You would use
backslashes, or
you would URL encode it, when you need to pass a space, you do.
So you just URL encode it in between the actual slashes of the parameters.
Right, exactly. So the actual parameters that you're going to pass and you were kind of putting on the URL, you would just URL encode those and put them in your URL. Should be good.
Wow, they like you.
Well, that's not necessarily what that implies.
No, that's actually right. I'm psyched. So seeing this, I now want to write a plugin that returns JSON and standard out, which would mess up your format because it says standard out : and then there's more JSON. So
how would that work?
Yeah. So can you give me any thoughts on that?
I think that would actually work because it takes a standard out and then it just has that as a string. And since people much smarter than me have done the JSON plugin for Python, if you pass a string that is valid JSON into JSON encode or JSON dump, I think it's JSON dump, it will actually return the escaped JSON in the string so that it won't become the JSON. So it will actually return that for you. I don't know. We could try it out right here if you want. Actually, let's try that out not in front of a lot of people.
Can you explain a little bit about the central management and remote deployment of agent or this agent?
Yeah, I can go into that for a little bit. How this is, as far as deployment of the agent, that's something, if you're interested in that, Yancey Ribbons is talking about npush tomorrow, and that is something that you would use. That's not really my wheelhouse, but that actually does push stuff out to remote machines. So I'm sorry I can't give you a better answer there, but I can give you a pointer to someone who does know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were becoming a packager, but are any of the packages available on any of the standard repos, or?
They are not available in the standard repos. They're basically available at web addresses for you to download them at,
Okay.
which would have been great to throw in the presentation, but let's see. They're on, actually I think I know it by, and I think it's NCPA head dot, okay, yeah, actually I don't know it by heart, but that would have been great to know. Because it, actually, it was actually just like officially, like there was like, okay, you can actually post this, Nick. This works enough. So that was just recent, but yeah. Gosh, that's an excellent question. I want to be able to tell like everybody so that they can use it, do whatever there is. But there should be a blast that goes. Well, yes, thank you. Yes, there will be a labs posting. Who said that? Thank you, Eric.
All right, on the screen you had a lot of graphs that you pulled up right there. One, can we create our own custom graphs? Is that something that's built in?
No, that's another forward-thinking thing that I was thinking, not forward on. You cannot create your own custom. You can create custom graphs if you have a JSON URL. Or a URL that will return JSON that returns it in the output that it expects, which is the JSON value is this, and then it's also got to have the actual name. So as far as like doing something in the interface to do it, no. But if you are familiar with like the actual Python templating language at all, I would totally merge that right in, if we can get graphs that are useful for people rather than the user count. That would be amazing.
The next question, what's the performance hit of the, if I'm watching those graphs on a live production machine?
Do you want to see?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that was something I was also concerned with as well. So if we come back here and we go and look at the dashboard, it's convenient that we are looking at the performance so that we can see the performance hit. So the memory usage, it's not spiked. What would spike is the CPU usage. So as you can see, the actual initial loading of the page is going on here. And then let's see what we can do to, that's assets. That's not the actual agent. So let's copy this and go to all paste. There's a dashboard. Let's check out something else. Let's just load the API and see see if it jumps like a jumping bean. Well, it went down. So apparently, when you access the API, so this is good for your CPU if you actually access the API. It doesn't. I mean, I guess I don't have a. Well, actually, let's see if I can. What? Yeah. See if maybe if I open two dashboards. Now let's watch what this one does. I mean, it doesn't seem to be like completely destroying the machine, which is good. So I hope that answers your question. I haven't run into. I mean, like I've been running this on my stuff, like at home and at work, and just to make sure everything's on and make sure that that it's all working. I haven't, I'm not exactly like right on the cusp of needing new machines, so that this is really super important that this that the CPU percentage stays where it is. But yeah, I haven't noticed anything that slows it down. I did, however, when I had them all on the same page, and on Windows boxes, I don't know, but if you guys have any Windows boxes, they've got like 20 billion interfaces. That was a bit of a stretch.
What's the service check definition look like at the server point of view?
I'm sorry, can you speak into?
What is the from the Nagios server point of view? How do I do those checks, and what would the service check?
Oh gosh, yeah, it completely blew my mind. There's if you're using XI, there's a wizard to do this, and it just like enumerates everything for you. It's one of the smart wizards that Ethan was talking about. If you're on Core, I'll just open up a new terminal, and there's actually, along with the agent, there is a client. There we go. Thank you, terminal, for filling my mouth with words. And it's just check NCPA. And I should have covered this. Thank you. This was actually something I completely missed. But anybody who's making has ever used Nagios before should be right at home with this one. It's basically just like a Nagios plugin. I mean, that's the idea. Put in your token, then you want your metric, and we want CPU. I like count, and I think this should just return 2. Yep. So obviously, this you don't need to write your own. Like as I was saying before, you don't need to. Oh, and that's off the screen again. I'm sorry. You don't need to write your own stuff to do it. You can if you want. But so like it's just so how to integrate this is you just grab this actual check NCPA plugin that I think I posted it to the Exchange. But if not, it will be tonight if it's not on there. If I told you that it was. That you would use to actually monitor this if you just wanted to use it in kind of a normal Nagios plugin fashion. Cool. And it doesn't have any outside dependencies either, which is nice.
Could you just real quick show the syntax for running a plugin, like an external plugin with it, as opposed to one of the built-in metrics? Yeah,
and we did cover that, but we'll do it again because it is so fun. Oh, you mean like in the passive?
No, an active check with check NCPA.
Okay, so like when we're doing this right here.
Check my custom script.
Yep, no problem. Yeah. So I think it's agent plugin Yancey for pres .shell. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So now I think we should be able to do something like this. Yes. Yep, exactly. So you just give it the arguments, much like that. It's been a little bit since I've touched the actual check plugin. Yes, you can also give it a -a for actual arguments that will be passed to it, or you can do it with the actual URL that you could test out in the API and just paste it right in there.
Any additional questions? I'm going to give you guys a minute to think about it. You sure? We got a legend sitting up there right now. All right, how about a nice big round of applause one more time for Nicholas
Awesome.
Scott, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.